There is a tape in a Stanford archive recorded in August 1971 of a researcher telling a prison guard that he is not being tough enough. The guard argues back. He says he doesn't want to, and you can hear the researcher talk him into it. That tape is from the Stanford prison experiment, the study whose whole point is that nobody told anyone to do anything. Okay, so, you know this one. Ordinary college kids, a coin flip, half get uniforms and mirrored sunglasses and half get numbers. 6 days later, the guards are monsters and the prisoners are wrecks. And the lesson is the one that sticks in your chest. It wasn't that they were bad people. It was the situation, which means it would have been you. I believed it. It got wheeled out on cable news the week the Abu Ghraib photos came out. It lets you off and accuses you at the same time. So here's the question this turns on. If the finding is that nobody instructed them, why is there a recording of somebody instructing them? Zimbardo gave his papers to Stanford libraries in 2011. 16 boxes. For years, nobody opened them. Not the critics, not the defenders. In 2017, a French researcher called Thibault Letexier went through the lot, including 48 hours of audio, and published it in American Psychologist under a title that isn't subtle. Debunking the Stanford Prison Experiment. Start the day before it began. Saturday, August 14th. The guards come in for orientation, and it's recorded. Here's Zimbardo in his own words. We can create boredom. We can create a sense of frustration. We can create a sense of fear in them to some degree. We can create a notion of arbitrariness, that their life is totally controlled by us, by the system, you, me, Jaff. And then, in general, what all of this leads to is a sense of powerlessness. We have total power in the situation, and they have none. We. He's saying we. The guards are staff before a single prisoner has arrived. Now the tape I opened with. A few days in, one of the guards is being useless on purpose. He stands outside during the counts. He doesn't shout. So the warden, an undergraduate called David Jaffe, takes him aside with a microphone running. We really want to get you active and involved, Jaffe says, because the guards have to know that every guard is going to be what we call a tough guard. The guard says, well, I don't know about that. Jaffe again. What I mean by tough is you have to be firm and you have to be in the action. Because whether or not we can make this thing seem like a prison, which is the aim of the thing, depends largely on the guard's behavior. The guard keeps pushing back. He says, I don't think I'm a very good guard for this experiment. I could have been a really good prisoner. Then the line, we need you to play the part of, tough guard and to forget some of the more sophisticated psychology that you might know and try and react as you picture the pigs reacting. That is not a scientist watching what happens. That's a director giving notes. Jaffe also says why it matters. The study should produce serious recommendations for reform so that, his words, we can get on the media and in the press with it and say, now look at what this is really about. They had the headline before, they had the result. Then there's the breakdown. 36 hours in, prisoner 8612 starts screaming. That clip is the proof. It's the moment in every documentary. 5 days later, they sat him at a microphone and asked what happened. The transcript is in the archive. First thing he says, I couldn't decide whether the prison experience had really freaked me out or whether I induced that freaked out thing. Then he explains, I decided I'm getting out and I was going to do anything, and I made up several schemes whereby I could get out. The easiest one, the one that wouldn't hurt anybody or hurt any equipment, was to just act mad or upset. So I chose that one. He also says why. It was boring, and he'd assumed a fake prison would at least let him read. But he says something else, and it's the honest part nobody quotes. Even while I was being upset, I was manipulating, and I was being upset. I was still upset. How could you act upset unless you were upset? So it isn't a clean fake. He was performing distress he was also genuinely feeling, which is not what a textbook means by a breakdown. And look at the order. He asked to leave. He was told no. Another prisoner remembers being told, you can't quit, you agreed to be here for the full experiment. Some of what held those men in there wasn't the roles. It was the researchers refusing to open the door. Right. Now the other side, properly, because it's better than the internet gives it credit for. When Zimbardo answered all this in 2018, he printed the Jaffe tape himself. He doesn't hide it. He quotes it, then argues about what it means. His first point is that it didn't work. Despite the request Jaffe made, he says, None of the guards behaved in a dominant way during the first two shifts. His second is the strongest. He and Craig Haney say there was not a single instance where an experimenter ordered anyone to harm anybody. And they say the opposite happened. The guards broke the rule against physically mistreating prisoners, took steps to avoid getting caught, and pushed back when the researchers told them to treat the prisoners more humanely. Haney was there that night. He says the man was shaking, screaming, and crying, and that he did not believe then and does not believe now that he was faking. And in 2018, Zimbardo signed a joint statement with his loudest academic critics, saying nobody has definitive evidence that any of them committed fraud or deliberately misled anyone. His opponent signed it too, and nobody scripted the specific cruelty. The worst guard built that character himself, off the warden in Cool Hand Luke. Critics still aren't satisfied because the coaching was never really about one tape. It's the orientation, the rules, the schedule, the counts, and a team that said no when prisoners asked to go home. Letexier wrote a reply to Zimbardo's reply. American psychologists rejected it for not being collegial enough. But there's a way to settle it that isn't an argument. Run it again and don't coach anybody. In 2001, two British psychologists, Stephen Reicher and Alex Haslam, did that on a set at Elstree with the BBC filming. 15 men, screened by clinical psychologists, watched by an independent ethics panel. 5 guards, 10 prisoners, 8 days. The sentence that matters is in their method. The guards were given no guidance about how they should achieve their goals. Neither researcher took any role inside the prison. The result came out upside down. The guards never became a group. They were embarrassed by the uniform and worried about how they'd look. The prisoners did become a group. Prisoner identification climbs across the days. Guard identification falls. Prisoner depression falls. Guard burnout rises. Late on day 6, the prisoners in cell 2 broke out and occupied the guards' quarters, and the regime was finished. Their conclusion: people do not automatically assume roles that are given to them in the manner suggested by the role account that is typically used to explain events in the Stanford study. Except that isn't where it ends. The men who overthrew the guards set up a commune on day 7. It worked beautifully for a day, then fell apart. On day 8, 4 of them, 1 former guard and 3 former prisoners, started pitching a regime harsher than the one they just destroyed. The people who built the commune sat and listened and said almost nothing. Across the whole study, authoritarianism scores went up. In everybody. So the finding isn't that people are fine. It's the opposite of Zimbardo's mechanism, not the opposite of his fear. Tyranny doesn't arrive because a uniform makes you cruel. It turns up after something people were trying to build stops working. Zimbardo's response, in the same journal, was to call their study fraudulent and to ask what prison anywhere in the known universe has the prisoners in charge. So where does that leave the thing in the textbook? A survey of 13 introductory psychology textbooks found 11 taught the Stanford prison experiment. 6 mentioned that anyone had ever criticized it, and that count was taken years before anybody opened the boxes. The tapes were in a library the whole time, cataloged, available. It took 46 years for someone to press play. So which is it? Is it still in the books because it's roughly right and the flaws are footnotes? Or is it still there because of what it lets us believe? That cruelty lives in the room and not in the person, and none of us would need much of an excuse. Because if that's why we keep it, the study did prove something about how ordinary people behave under pressure, just not about the guards.